What if I told you that sometimes love finds you when you're on your hands and knees scrubbing someone else's floors? Picture this. A marble mansion worth more than most people see in a lifetime, a billionaire so lonely he watches the cleaning lady through his window, and a love story that will defy every rule society has ever written about who belongs with whom. Have you ever felt invisible at work, like your dreams were too big for your current reality? Maybe you cleaned offices while dreaming of corner suites, or served tables while imagining owning the restaurant. Most of us know the sting of being overlooked, judged by our uniforms instead of our hearts. But what happens when someone finally sees past the apron to the angel underneath? What happens when love doesn't check bank accounts or read resumes? It just recognizes a kindred spirit across the impossible divide of wealth and poverty. Tonight, I'm sharing the breathtaking true story of Adira Thomas, a woman who rose before dawn to scrub marble floors and ended up capturing the heart of Graham Llewellyn, one of the world's most eligible billionaires. This isn't just a rags-to-riches fairy tale. It's a story about two lonely souls who found healing, hope, and happily ever after in the most unexpected place. This is proof that sometimes Cinderella doesn't need a fairy godmother. She just needs someone brave enough to see her crown when she's still wearing work clothes. If you believe love sees a heart, not the bank account, hit that like button right now. Because what you're about to witness will restore your faith that true love still conquers all, even in a world obsessed with status and wealth. Adira Thomas's alarm clock buzzed at 4:15 a.m. every weekday, a sound that had become the soundtrack to her dreams and determination. By 5:30, she was walking through the ornate gates of Hanover Estate, her cleaning supplies in hand, and her heart full of quiet purpose. The mansion sprawled before her like something from a movie set. 42 rooms of marble, mahogany, and millionaire luxury that most people would never see outside of magazines. But for Adira, this palace was simply her workplace, the place where she earned the money that kept her family's world spinning. At 26, she carried responsibilities that would crush most people her age, supporting her two younger siblings through school, caring for her diabetic grandmother who'd raised her after their parents died, and somehow finding money for her own night classes at the community college. Every morning, Adira moved through those marble halls with a grace that had nothing to do with the mansion's elegance and everything to do with her own inner strength. She treated each task like a form of meditation, polishing the banister until it gleamed, arranging fresh flowers in crystal vases, making sure every surface reflected the care and attention that had become her signature. The other staff members often complained about the long hours and demanding standards, but Adira approached her work differently. She saw beauty in bringing order to chaos, found satisfaction in transforming dusty surfaces into sparkling perfection. Her grandmother had always told her, "Baby girl, it doesn't matter what work you do. It matters how much love you put into doing it right." 3 nights a week, after finishing her cleaning duties, Adira hurried across town to attend business classes at Metropolitan Community College. She'd sit in the back row, still smelling faintly of cleaning supplies, taking notes on marketing strategies and financial management while fighting exhaustion. Her classmates, mostly fresh out of high school with their parents paying tuition, had no idea that the quiet woman in row 8 was working toward a business degree 1 credit hour at a time, funding her education with money earned on hands and knees. But Adira had no idea she was about to capture the heart of the loneliest billionaire in the city, and that her simple acts of kindness were already rewriting both their destinies. The truth was, someone had been watching her morning routine with growing fascination, someone who'd forgotten that kindness still existed in a world that had shown him mostly greed and calculation. Comment if you know someone who works multiple jobs to support their family, because what happens next proves that love recognizes sacrifice long before success. Graham Llewellyn owned everything money could buy and nothing that money couldn't. At 38, he commanded a business empire worth $12 billion, lived in a mansion that had been featured on the covers of architectural magazines, and could travel anywhere in the world on a moment's notice. He was also the loneliest man in a city of 8 million people. The staff at Hanover Estate moved around Graham like he was a piece of expensive furniture, valuable, intimidating, and definitely not to be touched. They spoke about him in whispers, calling him brilliant but cold, successful but impossible to please. The housekeepers cleaned around him when he worked late in his study. The groundskeepers tended his gardens while avoiding eye contact. The kitchen staff prepared meals he often forgot to eat. For 15 years, ever since inheriting his father's company at 23, Graham had lived behind walls of wealth that protected him from fortune hunters and false friends, but also isolated him from genuine human connection. Board meetings, charity galas, and business dinners filled his calendar, but at the end of each day, he returned to 42 empty rooms that echoed with the sound of his own footsteps. But lately, something had changed in his morning routine. Graham found himself lingering by the large windows in his study, ostensibly reviewing financial reports, but actually watching the young woman who arrived each morning with flowers for the front hall. There was something different about her approach to work, a care and attention that went beyond duty, a quiet grace that transformed mundane tasks into something almost beautiful. He'd started leaving handwritten thank you notes after she cleaned his study, simple messages acknowledging the fresh flowers on his desk or the way she'd arranged his books. Most staff members ignored his personal spaces unless absolutely necessary, but this woman, Adira, he'd learned from payroll records, seemed to understand that a home needed more than cleaning. It needed caring. Graham had no idea why he was drawn to watch her work. Perhaps it was the way she hummed softly while polishing furniture, or how she always straightened the family photos on his mantelpiece with gentle reverence. Maybe it was because she was the only person in his world who seemed genuinely content with simple tasks, who found joy in making things beautiful rather than profitable. The handwritten notes had started as professional courtesy, but gradually became something more personal. Thank you for the roses. They brightened a difficult day. The way you organize my desk helps me think more clearly. I appreciate how you take care of this house, as if it were your own. Graham told himself he was simply being a considerate employer, but deep down, he knew these small connections with Adira had become the highlight of his increasingly isolated days. For the first time in years, someone in his house was treating his space, and by extension him, with genuine care rather than calculated deference. He had no idea that this quiet appreciation was about to become something much deeper, or that a personal crisis would soon crack open his carefully constructed walls and let real love walk in. The call came on a Tuesday morning in February, shattering Graham's usual routine like glass hitting marble. His older brother Marcus, the only family member who treated Graham like a person rather than a bank account, had died suddenly of a heart attack while hiking in Colorado. At 42, Marcus had been Graham's closest confidant, the one person who remembered him before the billions, who called him little brother, and meant it with love rather than calculation. For 3 days, Graham didn't leave his study. He canceled meetings, ignored phone calls, and sat by the window staring at nothing while grief consumed him. The staff whispered concerns about his behavior, but no one dared intrude on his mourning. Board members sent formal condolences. Business associates offered professional sympathy, but no one knew how to reach the man drowning in sorrow behind the billionaire's mask. That's when Adira made a decision that would change both their lives forever. On Friday morning, instead of her usual cleaning supplies, she arrived at Graham's study carrying a plate covered with a kitchen towel. Graham looked up from his chair by the window, surprised to see anyone brave enough to enter his sanctuary of grief. "Mr. Llewellyn," she said gently, "I heard about your brother. I'm so sorry for your loss." She set the plate on his desk and pulled away the towel, revealing 2 slices of homemade bread, still warm, with butter and honey on the side. The simple offering filled the study with the comforting aroma of home-baked comfort. "My grandmother always said that grief makes people forget to eat," Adira continued, her voice soft but steady. "She taught me that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone in pain is make sure they don't face it on an empty stomach." Graham stared at the bread, then at this woman who'd never spoken to him beyond polite morning greetings, who'd somehow understood what boards of directors and social acquaintances had missed, that he was hurting and needed simple human kindness more than business sympathy. "Marcus loved fresh bread," Graham said quietly, his first words to anyone in 3 days. "Our mother used to bake it every Sunday when we were kids. The whole house would smell like—" He paused, his voice catching. "Like this." Adira sat down in the chair across from his desk, not presuming to leave, but not rushing to fill the silence either. She simply waited, giving him space to speak or not speak, to remember or to grieve. "He was the only one who never wanted anything from me," Graham continued, taking a small bite of the bread. Everyone else sees the money, the company, what I can do for them. Marcus just saw his little brother, who used to catch fireflies with him in our backyard. Tell me about him, Adira said simply, and Graham did. For 2 hours, he shared memories of camping trips and Christmas mornings, of Marcus teaching him to drive and defending him from school bullies, of late-night phone calls where his brother had listened to Graham's fears about running a company he'd never wanted to inherit. It was the first real conversation Graham had experienced in years. Not a business negotiation or social obligation, but genuine human connection with someone who asked for nothing except the privilege of listening. From that morning forward, their relationship shifted from employer and employee to something neither of them had expected. Friendship between two souls who'd found healing in each other's company. Have you ever found healing through an unexpected friendship? Share your story in the comments, because what grew from that moment of grief would blossom into something beautiful enough to inspire the world. Over the following months, Graham and Adira's morning conversations became the foundation of something neither had experienced before, a connection based on genuine understanding rather than mutual benefit. Graham found himself sharing business frustrations with someone who listened without trying to profit from his confidences. Adira discovered that beneath the billionaire exterior lived a man who asked thoughtful questions about her night classes and remembered her grandmother's health updates. Their friendship deepened through small gestures that spoke louder than grand romantic declarations. Graham started timing his morning coffee to coincide with Adira's flower-arranging routine. Adira began leaving books from her business classes on his desk, marked with notes about concepts she found interesting. He quietly arranged for the estate's extensive library to be available for her studies. She brought him homemade soup when he worked late, insisting that even billionaires needed proper nutrition. The transformation in Graham was visible to everyone who knew him. The icy demeanor that had defined his public persona softened into something warmer, more genuine. He smiled during board meetings, showed patience with difficult clients, and began taking weekends off for the first time in his career. Friends and colleagues noticed a change, but couldn't identify the source. They had no idea that Graham Llewellyn was falling in love with the woman who brought light to his previously empty mornings. For Adira, the friendship offered something equally precious, someone who saw her intelligence and ambition rather than just her circumstances. Graham never talked down to her about business concepts, never made her feel small for working multiple jobs to afford education. Instead, he treated her dreams of opening her own business with the same respect he'd give to any colleague's aspirations. But the moment that changed everything happened on a rainy Thursday in November. Graham had been reviewing acquisition proposals in his study when Adira knocked softly on the door. "I wanted to thank you," she said, holding up an acceptance letter from Metropolitan University's business program. "Your recommendation letter helped me get the scholarship for my bachelor's degree." Graham looked up from his papers, his heart stopping at the joy radiating from her face. In that instant, surrounded by the warm light of his study, while rain drummed against the windows, he realized that what he felt for Adira had grown far beyond friendship or admiration. He was completely, utterly in love with this woman who taught him that happiness didn't require acquisition. It required connection. "Adira," he said, standing and walking around his desk, "would you have dinner with me? Not as your employer, but as someone who cares about you more than he probably should." The invitation hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that would change both their lives forever. When Adira smiled and said yes, neither of them imagined the firestorm that simple dinner would unleash. The restaurant was discreet, but not discreet enough. By the next morning, photos of Graham Llewellyn dining intimately with an unidentified woman were splashed across tabloid websites. Social media detectives identified Adira within hours, and suddenly her name, her job, and her entire life. Story became public property. Billionaire's shocking romance with his maid screamed the headlines. Social media exploded with commentary ranging from fairytale enthusiasm to vicious class-based criticism. Graham's social circle buzzed with gossip about his inappropriate relationship, while strangers online debated whether Adira was a gold digger or a genuine Cinderella story. What happened next would shock high society and inspire millions, Because when you found real love, no amount of public scrutiny can make you choose money over happiness. The media frenzy that followed their first public dinner was unlike anything either Graham or Adira had imagined. Paparazzi camped outside Hanover Estate, hoping to catch glimpses of the billionaire and his cleaning lady. Tabloid journalists dug into Adira's background, printing invasive stories about her family's financial struggles and her night school education. Social media split between those celebrating a real-life fairy tale and those condemning what they saw as an inappropriate relationship between employer and employee. Graham's business associates pressured him to end the relationship, warning that it could damage his reputation and affect stock prices. His country club friends whispered behind his back about midlife crisis and unsuitable attachments. Even some family members called to express their concern about his judgment. But for every critic, there were supporters who found hope in their love story. Young women working multiple jobs saw validation that their worth wasn't defined by their circumstances. Older romantics remembered that true love had always defied social expectations. Business leaders who'd climbed from humble beginnings recognized the courage it took to love across class lines in public view. Adira faced her own challenges. Strangers approached her at work, some offering congratulations, others making cruel comments about knowing her place. Her night school classmates suddenly treated her differently, some with newfound respect, others with suspicion about her motives. The simple, private life she'd cherished became a public spectacle dissected by people who'd never met her. But the worst criticism came from those who should have known better. Graham's former fiancée, a socialite from an appropriate background, gave interviews suggesting that Adira was obviously using him for money. Business magazines published think pieces about the dangers of emotional decision-making in high-stakes careers. Even some domestic workers criticized Adira for betraying her class by dating her employer. Through it all, Graham and Adira made a decision that would define the rest of their relationship. They chose each other over everyone else's opinions. Graham held a press conference that became legendary in business circles. Standing before national media cameras with Adira beside him, he delivered a statement that silenced his critics and inspired his supporters. "I've spent 20 years building wealth, and 15 years learning that wealth without love is just expensive loneliness. Adira Thomas has brought more genuine happiness into my life than all my business successes combined. She's brilliant, hardworking, compassionate, and everything I could want in a partner. Anyone who can't see her worth is revealing more about their own character than hers." Adira, when given a microphone, spoke with the same quiet dignity that had first captured Graham's attention. "I've never asked for anything from Graham except his friendship. What we have is built on respect, shared values, and genuine care for each other. I hope our relationship inspires other people to look past surface differences and recognize the love that's possible when you see someone's heart instead of their job title." The press conference changed the narrative overnight. Instead of gold digger scandal, headlines began reading modern fairy tale and love conquers class. Social media sentiment shifted as people recognized the authenticity of their connection. Even Graham's business associates had to admit that his happiness had made him a better leader, more creative in negotiations, and more inspiring to employees. But the real test of their love would come when Graham made a gesture so romantic, so perfectly suited to their story, that even the cynics would have to believe in happily ever after. 1 year after their first dinner together, Graham led Adira through the estate's rose garden on a crisp spring morning that mirrored the day they'd first truly seen each other. The garden was in full bloom, filled with the same varieties of flowers Adira had arranged throughout his house during those early months of friendship. Roses, peonies, and jasmine that perfumed the air with the scent of new beginnings. "Do you remember the first morning I really noticed you?" Graham asked, stopping beside the fountain where morning light danced on water. "You were arranging white roses in front hall, humming something soft, treating those flowers like they were precious. I realized I'd been living in a museum instead of a home until you brought life into my house." Adira smiled, remembering that morning and so many others like it. "I remember thinking your house was beautiful but sad. All that luxury, but no joy. I wanted to change that somehow." "You did change it," Graham said, dropping to one knee and producing a ring that took Adira's breath away. Not because of its size or cost, but because of its perfect simplicity. A single diamond surrounded by tiny pearls, elegant and understated. Exactly what she would have chosen for herself. You changed everything. Will you marry me? The proposal photos, taken by a single trusted photographer and shared with their permission, showed the exact moment Adira said yes. Her hands covered her mouth in shock, tears of joy streaming down her face, while Graham beamed with the happiness of a man who'd found his missing piece. Their wedding, 6 months later, was a masterpiece of meaningful simplicity that reflected both their personalities and values. Instead of the society spectacle everyone expected, Graham and Adira chose an intimate ceremony in the state's rose garden with family and close friends. Adira's grandmother, now healthy thanks to medical care Graham had quietly arranged, served as matron of honor. Graham's late brother Marcus was honored with an empty chair decorated with white roses. The reception celebrated love over luxury. Instead of a 40-course gourmet meal, they served comfort food from Adira's favorite family recipes. Rather than hiring celebrity entertainers, they invited local musicians who'd played at community events Adira had attended while growing up. The wedding favors were donations to scholarship funds for first-generation college students, a tribute to Adira's educational journey and Graham's belief in investing in potential rather than pedigree. But the most beautiful moment came during their first dance, when Graham whispered in Adira's ear, "Thank you for teaching me that home isn't a place. It's a person who sees you exactly as you are and loves you exactly for that." Their love story captured global attention in the best way possible. Media outlets that had initially sensationalized their romance began featuring thoughtful pieces about class, love, and the changing nature of modern relationships. Business schools included their story in case studies about authentic leadership and the personal qualities that make great partnerships. Young women from working-class backgrounds found inspiration in Adira's journey from invisible employee to celebrated entrepreneur, because by their first anniversary, she'd used her business degree and Graham's support to launch a successful consulting firm specializing in workplace culture and employee recognition. Graham, meanwhile, transformed his company's approach to employee relations, implementing policies that recognized and rewarded workers at every level. The Adira initiative became a model for other corporations, proving that businesses thrive when they value people over positions. Most importantly, their marriage inspired millions of people to believe that love really could conquer social barriers, that kindness and character mattered more than wealth and status, and that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the simple decision to see another person's worth when everyone else overlooks it. If this proves that love conquers all barriers, subscribe and share this with someone who believes in fairy tale endings. Because in a world that often seems divided by money and status, Graham and Adira's love story reminds us that the human heart recognizes what truly matters. And when two souls connect across any divide, magic becomes possible. Remember, the next time you interact with someone society might consider beneath your notice, you might be meeting your soulmate, your best friend, or the person who will change your life forever. Love doesn't check resumes or bank accounts. It just recognizes kindred spirits and opens hearts brave enough to choose connection over convention. Who in your life has been overlooked but deserves recognition for their worth? Share their story in the comments below, because everyone deserves to have their value seen and celebrated.